Hello and welcome to a very brief video on improving writing proficiency with ICT enhanced learning. This video will talk a little bit about a study that was done in Dubai at Dubai Men's College with some Emirati students there. As we know, for students entering a tertiary educational institution, writing is an essential skill. So often students come into colleges, into universities without the necessary level of notion about academic strategies and requirements. As I mentioned, the study was carried out in at Dubai Men's College in Academic City, Dubai, UAE. This is a picture of the new campus. It's a fantastic campus, wireless connectivity throughout. All of the students had laptops, which was an incredible situation to be in and to teach in. Dubai Men's College is part of the higher colleges of technology, so there's quite a few different colleges around the place, including Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah, Al Ain, Fujairah and so on. There's both men's colleges and women's colleges, and this study was carried out at the men's college. Most of the students who enter Dubai Men's College are between the ages of 17 and 20, although some are mature and are working students, so they require the flexibility and access to materials outside of the college. The UN Human Development Report of 2003 recognised that a lot of Arab students were being taught in a very teacher-centred way and were coming out with high incidences of rote learning and memorisation, very surface learning. So they really struggled when they came to tertiary level education, where they had to use higher order thinking skills, to apply skills, use problem solving skills and so on. In the Foundations Department at Dubai Men's College, writing proficiency and vocabulary acquisition were the main two problem areas. In the final high stakes exam at the end of each academic year, a huge proportion of students were failing writing. So we decided to carry out a research study that would investigate the effect of a heavily scaffolded blended learning approach that was using resources specifically designed for Emirati students. In particular, we made extensive use of computer mediated communication, things like instant messaging, blogs, wikis, discussion boards and so on. Students were also we got them to really think about why they were writing, as well as using activities that were designed to develop students' writing and evaluation skills. Lots of peer collaboration and self-reflection, critical thinking and so on. The study was conducted with two sections, two classes of students, who were quasi-experimental groups, and also two other control groups who were basically working with their teacher as usual. So there were 4 faculty involved. The control group faculty taught their classes, especially their writing proficiency classes, and were observed, did interviews and gave feedback to the researcher. And the 2 faculty involved with the quasi-experimental groups were they participated in the sessions, but the sessions themselves were designed and run by the researcher for consistency. Prior to the study beginning, all faculty in Foundations and Higher Diploma were interviewed and asked to give feedback in a survey about the most important factors that they felt were important for improving writing proficiency. You can see here on the graph some of the factors and features that they identified and the importance placed on them by faculty. So some of the problems that had been recognised with Arab writers were, for example, limited research into Arabic rhetoric, a recent introduction of paragraphing and punctuation conventions into Arabic writing, paragraph development based on a series of circular parallel constructions, and the use of things like personal opinion without concrete support, repetition of 2 or 3 points, and avoidance of what was perceived as everyday spoken English vocabulary. So it tended to be quite flowery vocabulary that they were using. Alongside these, there were the usual types of problems with frequent spelling errors, verb tense agreement errors, inappropriacy of vocabulary, and not having much exposure to English outside of the class. So the design of the interventions was such that it made use of the laptops, really encouraged students to make meaning together, and resources were made so that they were likely to engage the learners. We used topics that had previously been identified by the students as interesting to them. We made sure there was a lot of active involvement. Students weren't told which tools they had to use, so they could select and have several tools such as a video, chat, a couple of people sitting around with them at the laptop, a dictionary, all of these things open whilst they were putting together their essay. They were also very aware that it was a meaningful task because they had to get through the exam at the end, plus they wanted to continue to study. Also, a lot of them were already trying to write reports and so on as part of their jobs. Faculty were also very aware that how can you know what to do unless somebody shows you first? So we put together a lot of models using partly Camtasia screen shotware with an imported PowerPoint, and had a voiceover narration with call outs and so on, which students could watch, for example, to find out how to structure an advantage disadvantage essay, or certainly to put them on the initial framework which they could then adapt as they wish to. We also modelled things like the blog reflections, which I'll show you in a second, and the chat, what we expected students to produce when they chatted. So we had, it was a group, a whole class discussion looking at, first of all, you had a friend, a colleague and I modelled this. So you had like ha ha ha, big kissy lips flying out of the screen, and then we discussed as a class, was this educational? Was it something that you might do in class, or was it kind of, it's okay outside of class but kind of wasting your time inside class? And then looked at a model of the types of input that we were hoping for with students. And after this reflective exercise, we actually ended up with some fantastic, really concrete brainstorming going on in chat. So the tools we used were WebCT, and in WebCT there was a specially built course that had things like the discussion board, quizzes and surveys, all the vocabulary quizzes, a link to the blog, some useful websites for improving writing, library resources, and obviously all of the videos and some information about how writing could be done. We also used chat. The reason that we used chat, and I've already talked about this a little bit, is that students in the survey before the study was started indicated that one of the hardest things that they found was to come up with ideas. So brainstorming ideas was kind of easy in chat because it has the informality, plus we could save the chat history and collate all of the ideas that came up during the chat. It's also really motivational, and students enjoyed it, didn't have to worry about accuracy, and could use all of the shortcuts like the letter U for YOU. We didn't ask them to do anything different. Vocabulary acquisition, you'll see here on this picture, was a key focus. So we did things like, this is a screenshot of the smart board that one of my colleagues used to teach some of the vocabulary before the pre-test, the post-test, and the retention test was done about 4 weeks after. So we also used blogs and discussion board as well as other multimedia tools that were available. This is another example of a smartboard exercise that one of my colleagues did with their class. I'm showing you this just to give you some idea of the extent of the input, the different types of input that we had through education technology. So, a typical intervention would be students would have a vocabulary test, then there would be some sort of class activity that might be looking at a video that was modelling an advantages, disadvantages type essay. Then students would get together and chat, brainstorm ideas. The ideas were collated and put in WebCT. The next intervention session, students would work again in pairs and on the discussion board would write a complete advantages, disadvantages essay picking and choosing from the list of collated ideas from the chat session. Once they'd put the essays into the discussion board, they then went and peer graded another pair's essay using a set of criteria that we also modelled how to use and gave examples of the types of feedback they might want to give, just to get them really thinking not only about the production side of things but really focusing on what was good about somebody's essay, as well as features such as the spelling's not so good. You'll see here in this picture that this is a model of a reflective blog. What we did at the end of every intervention session was ask students to reflect on what they had done and why they had done it. They could do this in class or out of class. This is just an example of the discussion board that we were using in WebCT and the sort of view that the students had when they went in here. This is an example of the end of semester exam, which was compared with the piece of writing that students had produced the semester before, the end of the semester before, to see what the differences were. Interestingly, the findings indicate that the quasi-experimental groups made significant improvements in their writing proficiency when compared with the control groups. However, it can't be concluded that this was as a direct effect of the interventions because there were a wide range of other factors that could have contributed. However, it definitely can be concluded that direct vocabulary tuition that includes repeated opportunities for recycling plus authentic communication is effective. The students from the quasi-experimental groups demonstrated marked improvements in pre and post tests and maintained this improvement in the retention test. We also found that the quantity of writing from the quasi-experimental students increased, and the faculty and the students clearly said that they were highly motivated by the ICT enhanced sessions and also could see why we were doing it. Students definitely enjoyed the interventions, and we hypothesized that if this approach was taken on a more regular basis and more than twice, that students would in fact maintain the level of improvement that they showed during the pair and collaborative essay writing, but didn't carry over into the handwritten sitting at a desk type writing. What was also very telling was students were saying, why can't we do this every time? We thoroughly enjoyed it. Plus the faculty, who were maybe a little bit unsure to begin with, were bowled away by the level and depth of learning that they observed, and were very surprised or delighted by the different interactions that they observed, with quieter students working with more confident students, so that there was complementary strengths being used. There was also the comment that laptop lessons, students walk around, they talk, they move, some might go out to the printer, they might go out to the library, so that it's not your traditional type setup where students are in the class all the time and the teacher is in control of exactly what they use and how they do it and when they do it. There's a lot of flexibility. What was really great though was students didn't turn into a chaotic upheaval. Instead, students really settled down and came up with some fantastic work and also learnt a lot. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to email me on hoin@unitec.ac.nz.